I decided, a couple things are happening here at the station, and you have to know about them. Don't worry, nothing crazy. Nothing crazy. In fact, everything's always getting better and better and better. The producer of this program and also the guy who answers all of your wonderful phone calls is Corey Inganamort. Corey is, sort of the engine behind this show. He writes all my scripts. Every word that comes out of my mouth is written by Corey. It's all teleprompter. I am the Joe Biden of this program. Now, Corey is a great producer, and this weekend on Saturday, he'll be hosting an hour right here on WMAL. So if you enjoy this program, you're really going to enjoy Corey Inganamort, 4 o'clock on Saturday. And so I pulled Corey into the air studio here. Corey, you ready, man? 4 o'clock Saturday?
I am pumped. I am fired up, ready to do this.
It's going to be great. It's going to be really great. All right, well, let's go through some topics here because I know I want to talk to you about Major League Baseball here in a moment because I know you are a guy you're an alum of the Major League Baseball experience. You were with the Washington Nationals for many years. Not as a player. You were the mascot of the Nationals.
I wore 00. That was my number. Yes.
That was your number, 00.
Yes. Matter of fact, real quick story. My grandfather, when I told him I was going to be the mascot for the Washington Nationals, he was a bit confused. He said, "Wait, you're going to be the mascot." So when I go hang out with a bunch of people and they say, "Oh, that's my son, number 10. That's my son, number 3." What am I supposed to say? That's my son, the chicken? I said, well, no, Pop. I'm an eagle, actually. And I hope you're proud of me.
What am I supposed to say?
He came around to it a little bit.
It's my grandson, the chicken?
Yeah.
That's funny. That's funny.
So, yeah, I did, as we've discussed on this show previously, I worked for the Washington Nationals for 13 years. I was their mascot, Screech. So I wore an eagle costume. I have some really great experiences, some interesting experiences where I get to ride the elevator, walk the tunnels. I overhear some underground workings of MLB, how people are leaning, what people are thinking. And a story popped up today that angered me. It angered me. Rob Manfred, the commissioner of MLB, announced that Atlanta will be hosting the 2025 All-Star Game.
I'm pleased to announce that the Executive Council has approved the Atlanta Braves as the hosts of the 2025 All-Star Game and the surrounding events.
Okay, so why would that anger you, that Atlanta was chosen for the All-Star Game? Why does someone get upset about that?
Because Atlanta was chosen to host the 2021 All-Star Game. They were supposed to host it, but commissioner of MLB said, no, we're going to fall to the political pressure that we're feeling from the left. Because if you remember at the time, Brian Kemp in Georgia instituted some laws, some really basic laws, like you need to show ID to vote in this state. And of course, the racist left was like, oh my God, how can you expect African-American people to vote with an ID? They said, no, this is a racist law. We can't do that here. So there was so much pressure from the left, from everybody involved up at the top of MLB that said, you can't host this. And he fell to the pressure. He said, we're going to cancel the All-Star Game in Atlanta. And we'll revisit it at another time.
Right. They moved it. They gave it to Colorado, right?
They gave it to Colorado. And I told this story before, but when they did that, I was asked to, I was all set to go to Atlanta that year, work it as Screech. Every year MLB brings out mascots. There's 27 of us. There was one mascot that decided, no, I'm not going to go to Colorado because I think it's a bunch of crap that you've canceled Atlanta's All-Star Game.
Who was that?
Who was what?
What mascot was that?
Well, Vince, it was Screech, the mascot of the Washington Nationals. That was me that made that decision.
So if we go back to the footage, the only mascot not to appear at that, what year was that?
2021.
2021 All-Star Game. That was Screech from the Washington Nationals, Corey Inganamort, because he was like, this is ridiculous. Why would you take the All-Star Game away from Atlanta? And history, of course, has proven you completely correct on every front because, what happened after they imposed the voter integrity law in Georgia? The election was perfectly fine. Yeah. In fact, turnout went up. No black voter was prevented from voting whatsoever. In fact, if that person even existed, the media would have made that person so famous, you would know their name reflexively. That never happened. And the only person at least in Major League Baseball, who seemed to recognize this was screech the eagle at the Washington Nationals. So you sat it out. You said, I'm not going.
I sat it out. I told my bosses, I'm not interested in doing this. I'm not going to support MLB's decision. And I wasn't allowed to speak to media at the time. I was hush-hushed. I told some friends, but that story never got out there. And I used to run the Screech Twitter account. And I got a bunch of messages. Oh, where are you? We're here in Colorado. We're looking for you. And of course, I couldn't respond. MLB got too political for me, so I decided to boycott. I couldn't say that. But come full circle, Atlanta is hosting in 2025.
Yeah.
And the obvious question is, well, why Rob Manfred? What changed?
And Rob Manfred was the commissioner back in 2021. In fact, here's some audio of him. Is this in response to a question, or did he just volunteer this?
He volunteered it. It's a real, he kind of sidestepped the issue. He knew it was controversial, but he really didn't want to discuss it. So this is what he said.
I've said it before. We wanted to bring an all-star game back to Atlanta. I made a decision in 2021 to move the event, and I understand, believe me, that people had then and probably still have different views as to the merits of that decision.
Barf.
What's most important is that the Atlanta Braves are a great organization. Truist Park and the Battery are gems.
Okay, what a clown.
Thank you, Rob Manfred. That's so nice. All is forgiven.
One of the many ironies buried in this story are that by removing the All-Star game from Atlanta, a majority black city, they hurt the economic prospects of Atlanta, which would have been the beneficiary of having the All-Star game, and all the local businesses would have been able to net some revenue from that. And then they gave it to Colorado in I think a majority white city. The whole thing, none of it made any sense. And the idea was, we're standing up for black people by making sure they don't get money. What is that about?
It's unbelievable. And after every All-Star game, the MLB does an economic report for the city that they just hosted it in. I looked up some numbers. When Washington, D.C. hosted the All-Star game in 2018, it brought $68 million to the city. When the next year Cleveland hosted it, brought $65 million to the city. LA hosted it the next year, $89 million to the city. And so this was in 2021. People are struggling already because of the government shutdowns after COVID. These small businesses are barely surviving. They were relying on this influx of money coming to their city. And a couple months before it was supposed to happen, Rob Manfred said no. So during this press conference, he barely addressed the issue. And then he took a few questions. He took 8 questions. Today. And the main story in baseball today is that the Oakland A's are moving to Las Vegas in 2028. So he took 8 questions. Every one of them had to deal with the move to Las Vegas. And I was so angered. Here's your one chance. He never actually really addressed this issue. And if I was asking the questions, I'd be like, hey, Rob Manfred, what changed? Did the laws suddenly not become racist? And if they are still racist, why are you hosting this?
It's too much. Sports media, not everybody. We know people who are good. But sports media is embarrassing.
It's awful.
It's like there's too much cowardice, and everyone, I can't ask that question. So nobody wants to ask anything interesting. They're all asking about the A's moving to Vegas. Come on, that's.
And there's never any accountability. He just briefly mentions it. Yeah, we're bringing it back, and we hope all is forgotten. It's the same thing that happens all the time in sports and in media. There's no accountability for COVID and all the lockdowns. There's no accountability for Russiagate. No one goes back and reflects and say, you know what, we were wrong. And what I would love to have heard him say, hey, Atlanta, I'm sorry. I would love to, those 2 words, I am sorry. Never got out of his mouth.
Out of his mouth. Well, the die was cast on this. I mean, the left went all in on this idea that Georgia was making its laws racist, even though, of course, the laws made the voting have more integrity, which was good. It required voter ID in every form of voting you possibly could do. And it resulted in fewer people having their votes rejected because of their stupid signature matching system where you're relying on election workers to stare at a signature on file and a signature on a ballot and go, yeah, those match, or no, they don't match. And then you're like, wait, who are you to do to render a judgment like that? For what it's worth, my signature when I was 18 years old does not look like the signature that I have now. At all. If I put those side by side, you'd be like, this guy is a phony. He's a total fraud.
It's racist to think that black people don't have IDs to vote to begin with.
Yeah.
Like how is this going to suppress the black vote because they have to show IDs when they vote? That's the racist perspective.
Here's how Joe Biden described it. Remember this?
Well, you stand for democracy. yes or no. And here's one thing every senator and every American should remember. History has never been kind to those who've sided with voter suppression over voters' rights.
Well, then why does the Democrat Party still exist?
And it'll even be less kind for those who side with election subversion. So I ask every
Well, then why does the Democrat Party still exist? I find myself repeating that.
elected official in America, how do you want to be remembered? At consequential moments in history, they present a choice. Do you want to be on the side of Dr. King or George Wallace?
Well, George Wallace was the Democrat.
Do you want to be on the side of John Lewis or Bull Connor?
They're both Democrats.
Do you want to be on the side of Abraham Lincoln or Jefferson Davis?
Abe Lincoln, the Republican, Jefferson Davis, the Democrat. So this is Biden. And so he said that, look, if you support voter integrity laws in Georgia, you are Bull Connor. You're Jefferson Davis. That's who you are. George Wallace. And that guy's a lunatic. But that's the way they were talking. And so MLB, they played right into this. They went right along with it, and they stripped Atlanta the opportunity to make the money in the first place.
Yeah, and Brian Kemp, governor of Georgia, kept fighting back about it. Prove that these laws are going to restrict the voting. He chimed in today on Twitter. Brian Kemp said, Georgia's voting laws haven't changed, but it's good to see the MLB's misguided understanding of them has. We look forward to welcoming the All-Star game to Georgia. Go Braves.
Yeah.
It shows a little bit of restraint in my opinion. I would have liked to have gone torched earth on MLB and Rob Manfred, but Brian Kemp's a better man.
You know, it'd be funny to whip up a bunch of lefties to protest the All-Star game in Atlanta now. Just be like, the voting laws are racist here in Atlanta. Just, we'll see. But that's probably not going to happen because, whoever's pulling the strings on all these particular protests is not going to snap their fingers and make that happen anymore this time. But boy, it's definitely happening. All right, so that's a wild story, and good for you for rubbing it in their face that they just straight up are hoping to dance past their lies about Atlanta in the first place. I'm going to play some other audio here. Stick around, Corey. This is Vivek Ramaswamy, the presidential candidate, was on CNN last night, and he was on with the host is named Abby Phillip, and she is trying to say that Donald Trump is a big old authoritarian, fascist, threat to America, threat to democracy, the normal line over at CNN. And so listen to how Vivek handles a line of questioning from Abby Phillip. And I'll just tell you ahead of time, masterfully.
That language, they live like vermin. Do you believe that is, as your Republican colleague Chris Christie has said, neo-Nazi rhetoric?
This is a classic mainstream media move. Pick some individual phrase of Donald Trump, focus on literally that word without actually interrogating the substance of what's at issue.
The word was chosen for a reason.
We are in the middle of a cultural war in this country.
The word was chosen for a reason.
It's actually describing a series of behaviors. You have Antifa and other related groups that have been burning down cities for the last 3 years in this country.
Would you describe them as vermin?
Wildly violating the rule of law. We have an invasion on our southern border. We have millions of people crossing our southern border. Let's talk about the substance of why we have to recognize that we're not in ordinary times.
Would you use that language yourself?
The vocabulary of the vermin or not is not what's important. Well, I haven't used that language. So you can look at my track record on the campaign trail. I talk about the issues. We all talk about them differently. But what I'm not going to do is play some game of focusing on some word that somebody else said without ignoring entirely the substance of what we're actually talking about. A border crisis of historic proportion. Economic stagnation we haven't seen in 50 years. A national identity crisis and a loss of national pride in the next generation that's potentially existential for this country. Let's talk about our dependence on China. Today we're actually talking about Xi Jinping, picking on Donald Trump's word vermin to talk about that status quo. You know what's vermin? What's running around San Francisco on a given day before Gavin Newsom cleaned it up on a dime to roll out the red carpet for Xi Jinping. If he could do that for Xi Jinping, he could have done it on an ordinary day, and yet we're here sitting talking not about the substance of that, but on one word that Donald Trump said in some speech in Miami. This is what's wrong with the mainstream media. Focus on the substance and let's have an actual policy debate rather than talking to a presidential candidate instead of the policy substance of what's actually going on in the country, picking on some word that Donald Trump said on a certain day and asking me for comment on it. Give me a break.
Give me a break. I mean, look, that guy... First of all, he's got a lot of talent, and it's only grown throughout this presidential campaign. I know people have picked on him. I've heard from people like, oh, he's repeated lines that he read from Barack Obama from back in the day. I wouldn't be surprised if he has actually integrated some Obama lines, but I guarantee you, I don't know him that well, but I guarantee you he's literally just using this because he sees Obama's ability to communicate, and he's trying to ape some of it as he pursues this career in politics. No question. And God, the guy just runs circles around these people. He's dominant.
He's so good. And what you don't see Abby Phillip do is ask members of Congress from the left would they agree with Rashida Tlaib's comments. Hey, do you support her from the river to the sea comments? It's always, hey, Republicans, what do you think about this off-the-wall comment that another Republican made? The standards are different. And personally, like, you can tell she's trying to compare Donald Trump to Nazi Germany. But, I think the party that tries to disarm you, the party that tries to censor you on Twitter or groom your children or open our borders, I think that's the party that closer resembles that ideology. And not Vivek Ramaswamy. What are we talking about here?
Abby Phillip is like a defender of totalitarianism, not the critic of it. It's
the two-tier justice system. I mean, if we're talking about Nazi Germany, let's compare the policies of the parties.
It's crazy.
Not Vivek Ramaswamy.
Well, look, you want to hear more from Corey? You can hear more from Corey. Corey Inganamort is going to be hosting WMAL 4 o'clock this Saturday. Please tune in.